Let me tell you about the great video essay idea I had. The fastest car in iRacing with working suspension. It would have been about the Ferrari 296 Challenge. Lovely car, very underrated in my opinion. I wanted to paint a picture of a rich CEO, a successful guy who is on top of the world but still lacks a sense of fulfillment. So he starts burning stupid amounts of money on his Ferrari Challenge racing program, where he races against other rich CEOs who also lack a sense of fulfillment. I wanted to argue that the appeal might be that winning races is maybe the only thing money can't buy. Maybe I'd explore this some more, sneak in a few political opinions, and explain how that kind of reputation might be harmful for the real-life series. Then, I would have switched to talking about how the Ferrari Challenge series in iRacing also has a terrible reputation, albeit for entirely different reasons. For years, it was the first GT3 series available to anyone who had just left the rookies, the mother of all crash fests and unsafe rejoins. I wanted to say how much I like how GT3 cars drive in LMU, and how you can feel them transferring mass, rolling, pitching. I'd explain how that impacts the way you drive them, and how iRacing's GT3s are kind of stiff, rather boring and detached even. And then, at the end, I'd reveal how great the 296 Challenge actually is, how surprisingly close it feels to LMU's GT3 cars, and I'd try to convince you to give it a try. It was perfect in my head. Smart, funny, provocative, and interesting. The best idea I've ever had. But then, I actually started writing it. I am not a very good writer. I lack foundational knowledge. Things that are taught on day one in a writing class are, for me, huge breakthroughs I have to work really hard to figure out on my own. I started doing this channel armed only with the vibes. And it turns out that painting pictures with words is much harder than I thought. It sort of parallels my experience when I started sim racing, but I might be digressing a bit. Anyway, that opening dragged. I wasn't happy with anything I typed. Nothing I actually wrote could match the feeling and the idea I had in my head. Unable to make any progress, I fooled myself into believing I'd fix the opening after finishing the rest. But still, the paragraphs didn't gel. I was incoherent, endlessly wandering around the same basic idea. It was frustrating. After a few days of struggle, I needed a break. My relationship with this essay had become a bit toxic. And when I sat down to re-examine the best idea I've ever had an epiphany. I wasn't writing an essay, I was writing a pitch. At the end of the day, all I was doing was trying to convince you to buy and like something I bought and liked. I was a salesman. Maybe the kind that truly believes in what they sell, but the salesman nonetheless. And I don't want to sell content, just discussion starters, and maybe some merch along the way. Ctrl-A, delete. I realize I'm gonna have to approach this from entirely different angle. The next day came, and I started doing my usual mindless labor at work. My conscious mind switched off, and I could finally hear my subconscious almost screaming at me. Tim, your idea is horrible. Just let it go. And you know what I did? I didn't resist. I embraced it. I let it ring in my head for the rest of my shift. It was almost liberating. I could almost taste a new breakthrough somewhere in all of this. I just needed a bit more clarity. And later that day, it almost hit me in the head. Having an idea isn't the same as having a great or even just a good one. And it's okay. It doesn't need to be. I just need to learn to pick a decent one to work with and accept that some neuron activity in my brain is just a waste of oxygen. I used to race for the dopamine rush you get when the stars line up, the universe gives you its blessings, everything goes your way, and you end up winning the race. You know this feeling too. You did the chores, you've prepared, and you're faster than your opponents. You're unstoppable. And just as you start getting used to being one of the fastest drivers on the grid, you end up in a top split. Suddenly, your personal best quali lap leaves you P26. That one guy behind takes advantage of the tiniest mistake you make in T1, which leads to a lockup, and then nothing interesting happens. You lap around the track for 45 minutes just to finish P27. and only things that interrupt the boredom are the occasional blue flags being waved at you. What a horrible race! You didn't sign up for this. You want the good stuff again. The cruel paradox is that the better you get, the less frequent good results will be. Progress will inevitably slow down. The law of diminishing returns is merciless. A very important part of the journey up the ladder, one that community discusses way less than the meta cars for Spa, is to learn how to reframe what constitutes bad, good, and just normal. At some point, numerical results must become less important, and the focus should shift to the lessons you can learn from each race. In my book, locking up in T1 on lap 1, only to never make this mistake again for the next 26 laps, is a very good outcome, even if you end up last. Learning to let your ego go and allowing a faster driver to overtake you without wasting valuable lap time is a great lesson, worth much more than one position. Repairing the car, rejoining the race, and finishing it after getting wrecked in the first 5 minutes of the race leaves you with your patience and resilience stats leveled up. You grow accustomed to racing without actual racing. And if you're feeling really adventurous, you might even analyze what you could have done differently to avoid the wreck. The future endurance racing enjoyer in you will be deeply grateful for that. Not every lap will find you fighting door to door with others. Not every race will be the most exhilarating experience you've ever had on the track. But you know what? They don't need to be. And it's completely okay. Despite what YouTube compilations might have led you to believe, most of racing is boring, uneventful, and methodical lapping. Embrace this as the normal. I lost over 300 iRating the other day. At my level, it's a significant chunk, over 10%. These were not only bad results, but also bad races, the kind that leaves you too frustrated to learn any lessons. I was blinded by my recent constant gains, and I needed to keep them coming. So, I was fighting like my life depended on it. I started defending like an idiot, dive bombing and overdriving, ruining my races and those of the drivers around me. I wanted to keep the good stuff flowing so badly. I took a few days off iRacing. My relationship with the sim was becoming a bit toxic. I fell into the death trap of valuing myself and my sense of belonging to the community based on how high my iRating was. The game stopped being fun. It became a very stressful and demanding job, the kind one dreams of quitting before falling asleep every night. But I eventually got back. My lap times were not 10% slower. Not even 1%. They were exactly the same. Of course, I knew I wouldn't be literally slower. I'm not that stupid. But I wasn't worse. I wasn't a less capable racer. The pace was still there, and I still belonged with the community. I was experiencing the pure joy of racing again. That unique excitement before gridding up in a weird car on a weird layout I didn't even know existed, without caring about the result. I reached the "if you love your job, you won't work a day in your life" stage again. The "there are no bad races if I can keep focusing on growing" stage. I will earn, not force, the good stuff again. This is just another reminder of how much self-control and restraint it takes to reject the almost animalistic instincts that wake up on a racetrack, regardless of whether the pit lane is made of bricks or polygons. It takes the same restraint to scrap an idea that feels so deceptively compelling. There will be many more bad races and many more bad ideas. I am human after all. So are you. What matters is whether we can step aside, look at them, and turn them into something worthwhile. Let's not forget that. By the way, give 296 Challenge a try. It's much nicer to drive than to write a whole essay about. Thanks for watching.